Oh, okay. I didn't know that would do that. Are they
Yeah.
too? Is that the problem?
Are they what?
Are they too sugary?
No, they kind of give the kvass like a weird taste, weird aftertaste.
Oh, okay. I know what you're saying. It's like a mast. It has it's sort of almost like a woody flavor. I don't know how to say it.
No, more like oily flavor. They give it an oily flavor. If you get what I mean.
Mm.
Yeah,
Not,
that's not okay. Yeah,
Wow.
but
With
yeah.
that said, 40 seconds ago, we just went live. So everybody
Ooh.
gets a little taste of the behind the scenes conversation that
Ooh.
often revolve around food. But thank you all for currently joining us. We have
Oh,
Moral Officer Grant being the first
hello.
to step into the arena
yay!
here.
We're
Thank you. Our usuals bleeding in to enjoy the stream. And thank you for joining us today. We have a magnificent conversation ahead of us revolving around magic. The reason I chose this particularly is I actually recently watched a breakdown of magic and how pop culture has sort of diluted the sort of a zeitgeist of how we see magic. How we now see magic as more of a
yes.
D&D thing and
Yes.
less of its archaic form. And I thought it would be
Yep.
very interesting to actually
I can talk about this. Yeah.
to explore magic in pop culture, magic in history and lore and things of that nature. One of the most interesting things that they brought up was how Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings actually taught them some magic spells. One of them being to walk on a particular side of a barrel to keep from getting some bad attention or to kind of calm some monsters within the barrels. Talking about how this is a form of magic that has been diluted by that whole popular D&D style of cast fireball, where magic isn't just something a wizard does, but it could be how where you go, what you avoid, what you refuse to step on, throwing something over your shoulder, and more so something a much more personal effect, if you will. Speaking that magic is often used as a personal thing to get personal desires, not to unlock doors or go invisible, but to try to gain some sort of wealth or love or some desire of the heart or personal gain being the sense of magic. So I thought, let's explore magic in our own culture. Let's dig into this one because I know both
Basically
are going to have some very interesting stuff. Go ahead, Black Knight. I'm holding you off.
Basically, what you just mentioned was how magic was seen in the ancient world, like ancient Greece, Egypt, and so forth. So the magic was not the province of wizards or sorcerers, though you had some who were like specialists in various types of magic, but magic was like a thing that everyone could do, pretty much. Everyone could say a spell, write like an incantation, scribe some runes, make an amulet or something, and they would basically do exactly what you mentioned, like everyday stuff. I want my shop to prosper, and I want the store of my competitor to fail, or I want to find my cat because my cat is missing. And you have like a historical wealth of a lot of these incantations, is these everyday spells, this like lived magic, so to speak. In history, you can probably find the most in the early Roman period. And you have these everywhere, like it's full of them. So yes, pretty much it wasn't it was nothing like the D&D magic, and I can talk about it because I DM'd for you. I am still a DM. I did that for many years, so I have some, let's say, knowledge about it.
Yeah.
And it's, as you said, it's like a pop cultured style of magic. It's sanitized. It's made
Like a
unnecessarily, yeah, and it's made unnecessarily unique in the term that it's been taken from its everyday context and given to special people, quote unquote special people, who only they could cast spells, only they could let's say remove a curse on, or only they could summon a spirit and talk to the spirit, or only they could convince the monster to not eat your ass. Because yes, we have evidence of that too. So travelers who would go on a long trek, and by back then people did not, like most people, they do not have horses. Horses were expensive. They would walk. And what happens if your son, for example, gets lost in the forest, and you know that there are monsters in the forest? Let's say, for example, in the Slavic folklore, there is Baba Yaga is in the forest. Baba Yaga can eat you. So you make a special amulet, and you write a magic spell in the amulet, like your mom or your grandma or your wife. It has to be a woman in this case, and they write this magic spell, and it's actually like a bunch of curse words directed to Baba Yaga. And when she sees you, when she's in the presence of this amulet, she can hear the curse words, and she basically, the idea is that she gets like, "Oh, you're calling me bad names, like fuck you, I'm going to go away." So this is one of the examples. This is one of the examples that I know. So when we talk about the D&D pop culture magic, or how I would like to call it otherwise, Hollywood magic, this is no longer the everyday magic of the ancient world. This is no longer the historical magic that we know of. It has, as I mentioned, been given this like undeserved uniqueness, and it's mostly for dramatic purposes, because if you're making a movie, or in this case a game, and every single peasant, like every your random grandma on the street can make them like the magic. Why the hell do, like, the entire uniqueness of the like small cast of characters goes away? And so they had to do it. Like it was more of a stylistic choice than anything else. And as a DM, I can tell you that there is a whole lot of magic that shouldn't operate as magic. It's more like how should I put it? In D&D, it's if you compare it to the old like real life historical everyday magic, it shouldn't be possible, because the everyday magic, it's more like you are trying to either convince some spirits to not harm your, or like curdle the milk of your neighbor, or convince the woman to fall in love with you, or something else. You're you're not opening a fucking portal to another dimension.
Yeah.
Or you're not casting like a lightning bolt. No. In the ancient magic, if we're talking about lightning bolts and fire, they are actually calling on like the assistance of, let's say, the gods or the ancestors, and then you have the priests who are actually doing magic. They're doing like let's say a slightly different tier magic because they have the ear of the gods, you know. So there is that like slight specialty in the ancient ways of magic, but that's it. Like, and in the case of the pop culture Hollywoodized D&D magic, no, yeah, you have this epic level tier magic where you can disintegrate entire mountains. You can do insane stuff, like almost insane level of stuff. And this is how when you attempt to compare it, the historical magic with this, there is always a bunch of like a whole bundle of the epic level stuff which does not fit in with the normal magic. It doesn't. And it's again, I will say that it's done with stylistic purposes in mind, because yes, if you have your characters and they're unique, you will also like them to stand out. So how do you make them stand out? Well, you give them giga powerful magic, destroy a dragon with like array of disintegration, or move the mountain, or like levitate the ship, or this and that, like do some insane like epic insane level stuff. So yeah, this is, I can talk about it like for hours on end.
All right, yeah, I think that was a pretty good intro there. The chat filled up a bit. We have ourselves Dovahkiin ES5 saying hello over here. Hello, dear sir. You know, we did skip intros a bit. So how is everybody doing? Well, we start off with you, Black Knight. You just finished. What have you been working on? How are you doing?
Well, I have, as I mentioned last time, I'm working on the last act of book 8 in my Star Shattered series. It will take me a couple of months, but it should be done this year and published. I am also working on the weekly chapters for Substack, the fantasy one, which should be out there tomorrow. The continuation of called The Winding Road, which is Wind of Cleansation. And Friday, my science fiction detective story, which has been quite awesomely received by a lot of our old friends from Gilded, and new friends from Substack. So yeah, if you like not so dystopian detective, sci-fi detective set in my Star Shattered universe, you would love that one.
Nice. Now, how about you, Snow?
It's called Crumbs, by the way.
Crumbs. All right.
Yeah, Crumbs.
On your Substack, correct? All right. Catch that on the Substack there, y'all. Now, how about you, Snow? How have you been?
Oh, we've had a lot going on. So as you know, my father-in-law is having a little bit of he's getting older, and there are a lot of things happening to him right now that are, a little bit tough to negotiate. So we've had been going back and forth. So that is the reason you haven't seen me as much on Substack. because his internet quality isn't very good, and we've been over there a lot. So I've only been able to post like one poem a week or something like that. I've been working on my book also. I've been have been able to do that because I can do that offline. And right now it's out, of course, to the beta readers, and I'm waiting for that to come back. Waiting with
Nice.
baby. Yay. For Hellbilly Highway, which I'm hoping to get done before summer, to get it published and get it out. So that way we can move on to the next book, which I've already started writing. So I'm very excited about both those books, but it's just getting sort of through the life part of it. And so it's like, wow, I have to have to juggle a lot of things. And so I felt really bad about missing a lot of stuff that's on Substack right now, but I love it when I get the chance to catch up with you two guys, because it lets me know what's going on. You kind of, it's sort of like, this is my weekly gossip session. I get to actually jump in and hear what y'all have going on with it. So that really helps me a whole lot.
All right. Yeah, you're staying busy out there. And you know, this is where we're tapping you in for the magic conversation there that I lovely disrupted. What sort of studies have you done on magic for your writing and stuff that has kind of, you know, been produced through that?
I'm very excited to hear about this because actually my, as you know, I've talked before about how my family actually is very long. We have long reproductive cycles. Let's put it that way. Well, I was born to a man when he was in his 40s, and his father was born to him in his 40s. As a result, my great grandfather fought in the Civil War. So I actually never have met him, of course. My grandfather was born in 1881. So I have this really weird timeline that I'm actually in contact with things that most people have never really been in contact with. I've spoken to people. For instance, my own grandmother was born in 1897. She was, you know, from 2 centuries ago almost, when you're thinking about it that way, a century before the last century. And so I know things and have heard things that a lot of people lost information about. And this subject is very exciting to me because we're talking here about folk magic. Folk magic and folk superstition, it's ritual. It's not just a belief. It is something you have to do in order for you to be in contact with the world around you and to manipulate the environment that you're in. And there's more to the world than just what we see. When you're thinking of folk magic, there is an unseen dimension in which we try to manipulate that energy and the beings that live there and everything else that's around it. And my great grandfather was actually what's called a root doctor. And a lot of people haven't heard of that nowadays, but it's usually a term that is used by certain ethnic groups to denote a person who not just knows herbal medicine, but who also knows how to use those herbs to conjure up luck or spirits or other things. And it's not done with malicious intent, or it shouldn't be. When it's done at its best, it's done to heal and to make well. It's to find out if there's something bad out there, perhaps that isn't supposed to be there. And of course, my people were deeply Christian as well. So it's sort of a weird combo for most people. They think, oh, there's folk magic. That means that you have to be a witch or you have to be something else. In the American South, hoodoo or root doctoring and those traditions were uniquely married to Christian theology. And at the same time, it was bound up in African tradition and other Native American belief. And as a result, you have these deep Eastern belief systems of spirits that are in every living creature and also in every inanimate object. Inanimate objects have life at some level. They have an energy. They have an imbued with a power. And so when you are using something, you are calling on that power. And one of the things that my father, of course, who was born to the root doctor's son, and my grandfather was a doctor. My great grandfather was a root doctor, and my father passed some of that knowledge on to me. And we've talked about how when he was little, how he would go out in the deep East Texas woods. They lived not far from what's called the Big Thicket. And of course, we've talked before about how he could hear someone calling his name out in the woods. And it's not his mother, and it's not someone he knows. It's the spirit of the forest. It's that green man, the call, the lure of the wild. And it is not necessarily malevolent, but neither is it benign. It is a force that is interacting with human beings at a level that would be considered magical. And so he passed this knowledge on to me, the idea that trees have a spirit, that you can't just go and cut everything down because there's a spirit on the land, that you can't do these things. You need to interact with it properly. You need to speak leveling to the land and to the trees in it. And there was never a time when he just went out and cut down a tree without talking about it first, and doing something to, to try to mitigate that loss. And the same thing with hunting and other things. There was always a cost. If you hunted an animal, you were taking its life, but you would be giving back your own life someday as well. That sort of idea of mana that comes up in the systems, the magic systems of fiction nowadays, was a real and present thing in the past, because we all knew that ashes to ashes and dust to dust, people would eventually die, that we want to take life in a respectful way because we know that someday something will take ours. And so there was this give and take that was so unique for him that I didn't find in people later generations. And once again, this is something that he's raised. He never got to meet his own grandfather face to face. His grandfather was already passed away by the time he was born in 1924. And my grandfather died in 1940. I never got to meet him. As a result, these are stories that are passed through word. And the other magical element that we're missing in folk magic is the word, logos, the ability to speak something into existence, the power of the word itself, to speak something and it becomes real, is incredible. And it's not something that a lot of people actually pay attention to now. Words are just thrown out. They're just cast away. I do it too. I cuss and I don't even think about it. And it's like, that's actually a curse. This is why it's called a curse. It is actually designed to harm somebody. It has meaning. It has bearing. It will actually hurt someone, even if they don't hear it. And so words become real. They have weight. They're heavy. And we have to be aware of how we use our words. And of course, if you're a religious person, then words become an incantation. They become a prayer, or they become a calling, an invocation of a good thing. And so we have this an unusual mix of the deep Southern ideals of hoodoo and root doctoring and Christianity all melded together into this really unique, I believe it's really unique, that mix of American folklore magic and how it is related to specifically the plants of the Southeast and the South. And it's, of course, Texas, East Texas was considered part of the Southeast. It is that green, verdant forest that most people don't think of when they think of Texas. But it was, my people have been here for over 250 years. And so that knowledge of the forest and the people in it and how they interacted with this very sometimes brutal environment and the creatures that lived in it and how they interacted with them has become part of my life. And to grow up with that and to realize how unique it is, to know the ancient ways, to understand that the things that my grandfather and my great-grandfather taught my dad were actually something that was taught to them by the Cherokee before them and the Seminole and other tribes. The tribe that I actually am descended from is the Pamunkey tribe of Virginia, and I have their blood in my roots. But knowing that those words were passed to me, some of them word for word by my father to me, imbues it with extra power, because the words they taught me and the meaning it has are part of the magic.
Interesting, very interesting. Has any of this found its way into your writing?
Yes, I think that one of the things that we talk about in Watcher the Damned, and I actually imbued this into the story. Rose is very suggestible. She has been raised in a state of the words being life, words having meaning. She's actually emotionally conditioned and behaviorally conditioned to words. And because she's raised in that environment, when she starts hearing certain poems or certain songs, she enters a state of almost a trance-like state with some of it. And my father had actually taught me about this when we're talking about chanting or doing other things, that there's a certain rhythm that you get into, where if you've ever had somebody read out loud to you and they're in the room, it's not the same when you're listening on a podcast or something else. When you have somebody in the room with you, with vibration, actually, you can actually feel it inside of you, especially when their voice is very rich. And there's this drone to it that almost is not monotonous, but it's hypnotic. And having been raised up with people who actually actively read to us, sometimes epic poetry, things that would last sometimes for a half hour or more, where we would sit and listen to people read in a rhythmic voice. I grew up with that, and I put it into my work, where Rose actually has this effect take place, that she has been raised that if people speak the right words to her, that she will sort of enter this state of calmness and receptiveness, that she's more likely to do what she's told or more likely to do as she's been asked, because she has been trained behaviorally to respond to these words. But it's part of that magic, the rhythm of the South. And we've talked about this. From the pulpit is where you hear it. That rhythm of the preacher in the pulpit, as he speaks the words and it comes out in these phrases, and the people hear the phrases, and it has this rhythm to it that draws them in. It has a rhythm to it that makes them want to listen. It's the storyteller of the griot back in Africa. As when they're telling the story, there's a rhythm and a build that comes up, and it makes it bigger and bigger and stronger till at last you know the story is actually reaching its climax. And then there's the falling off. Then there's the denouement as it goes down. Well, this rhythm and this verbal magic, the ability to connect the storyteller or the incantation with the person who is listening, is part of the magic in Watcher of the Damned. And what makes it so poignant is the Watcher cannot speak. He is unable to reach Rose in this way. She has been trained to respond to people who speak to her in their natural voice. And as a person who was born and became deaf at an early age, and then later on was able to be cured through modern medicine, there is a difference in hearing that vibration as opposed to the flat sound that comes from a machine. The human voice is very powerful. It is a resonant chamber, and when we hear it and its person is close to us, you can feel it inside of you. For Rose, she's only hearing the Watcher through her ring. She can only hear him when he speaks to her through her device. As a result, there's a layer between them that's missing, something that she's trained and been all her life been pointed to respond to the spoken word as this magical bond between people, between the speaker and the listener. And she herself has powers in that actually that are revealed as we go further into the story, her voice and her ability to reach people through her song and her voice and her words. He's not able to share that with her. He's not able to speak to her. He's lost the ability to speak. And so the only way he can reach her is through the word itself, what it means, what it says. But there's a layer missing. And that magic, that vibration of life that comes with us speaking is part of the story of Watcher of the Damned. It is part of that bond between Rose and the Watcher, and what will happen without it. What happens when that magic isn't there? How will he overcome it? And so we've incorporated that into the story. And also there's other story parts in there. The story opens up with a spirit that's seen. And I've talked before about in my family that my father and my mother both spoke of early on about seeing things, of having encounters in the darkness with entities that we can't describe, that aren't able to be truly visualized in a physical fashion. That these are spirits, these are things out there. And I know this sounds really crazy, and this is me, I'm a preacher's wife, and I understand that we belong to Jesus Christ, we are in his care, but there are things out there beyond our ability to understand, and I've seen them myself. And so I was raised in this family where you will see these things. My father saw them, he said his father saw them before him, that this is just part of our family legacy. And so in Watcher of the Damned, even though it is a sci-fi western and it's set in this dark dystopian future, it starts with a vision of a child that nobody's ever met in a world where children don't exist. And she's not in this present plane. And that encounter with the Watcher, because he's a cynical and more or less, even though he knows that there are things that scare him, this encounter with this child is the catalyst that will lead him to that revolutionary moment. The bond beyond what we can see, the ability to touch something that is not in this present world, is what catapults the story from the darkness and the grind of post-apocalyptic Texas into a future that can encompass a world with children. And so that portion of my experience with folklore and magic, the unseen and the spirits and the things that are out there, and this vision that he has that keeps on coming back to haunt him all through the story. This child is a character, and I wanted that mystery, that uncanny fear to be there, of seeing something you know shouldn't exist, and yet you are seeing it.
Oh, it's very haunting right there. But then again, when you think of the folklore magic, if you want to call it that, there's a bit of like a eerie, haunting vibe about it, for sure. Black Knight. Is there any local folklore that revolves around magic that you'd like to share about?
Well, there is the old Slavic stuff, which is derived from the old Thracian stuff, which is linked to the ancient Egyptian stuff, meaning that it was everyday magic.
Very global.
Yeah, you had like all of these amulets with written incantations folded in them, or like rings that had the incantations inscribed on the inner part of the ring, almost like the one ring from the Lord of the Rings, which is where historically it comes, like the inspiration comes from that. It is written on the inner side of the ring, by the way, so that it would interact only with you. And whoever reads it, they will actually understand that what the incantation, what the spell is, and it would not affect them. So that was the thing that I learned back in the day. Later, much later, I actually watched a documentary about this ring that was found in Knossos, which had this incantation inscribed on it, and it was like the ring of some priestess, which gave her power over this and that. So yeah, but the local Slavic stuff, it's, as I mentioned, it was quite prevalent. It was married at the hip with Christianity, with early Christianity, meaning that you had priests, monks, who were being criticized by their bishops in Constantinople for doing spells. And they're like, no, you're not supposed to do the spells. Why are you doing it? It's not that they were not supposed to do the spells at all. It was just like that the bishops attempted to usurp the authority of the everyday people of like doing this folk magic, and to a certain extent there was this case that to be made that there were people who were abusing it, and as Snow mentioned, they were cursing others. They were using it to harm others, and people were afraid that it's going to cause something like natural disaster. That's the other thing I forgot to mention. So if you're doing too much negative stuff, it gets like it accumulates in land, and eventually you get to have a natural disaster. And this is where you get this Asian, it's not just Asian, but this concept of the mandate of heaven, where if a ruler does too much evil, abuses their authority, eventually they curse the land through their acts, and through their words, because of course when you enact something into law you have to word it, and it's an incantation of sorts. So yeah, and then you create an imbalance in nature, and it manifests in the way of a natural disaster. So yes, magician, I know, I'm sorry, but just like Snow talked about how and why she infused this particular kind of magic into her work, I did some into mine. And let's say the everyday aspect of magic in the Star Shattered universe, especially for the humans, for the Terrans, are the it's pretty much it's words. It's the Terran word, and the morale officers who remind people of the power of the word, the inspirational. Well, basically, they are not using it to curse anyone. They are pretty much using it to embolden themselves and their fellow men, or their fellow bunny or hamster, and weaken their enemy. And it's to weaken the enemy, you basically need to use the words to understand what is the at least one of the inner weaknesses of the enemy. And by using key words, they betray their weakness by virtue of them having let's say vices. Let's say they are gluttonous, they are too prideful, etc., etc. So by using this word magic, this folk word magic, the Terran word, pretty much you can enact events through your enemies and make them reveal their weaknesses, and then of course exploit them. And by of course using the other aspect of the word, embolden your friends and allies, so they would in some cases they would, for a time, they would even ignore their wounds. They would suffer horrendous pain, and they would somehow survive things that others would not. And as for the other thing that she mentioned, Snow mentioned, was that items have energy. Some items have, throughout the years of being in the presence of and being used in a certain way by humans, they have developed not just an energy, they have not just accumulated a certain energy, but they have developed sentience, almost like a spirit. And I'm talking about even a complicated item like a spaceship. And now I'm spilling secrets, and I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that in general, well, kind of studying it and going down a rabbit hole myself in the past, you see that it's heavily connected to culture. And I think that our current rendition of magic kind of shows us where our culture is, in a sense where it's sort of wrapped around pop culture, wrapped around various products and things of that nature. And it seems like a lot of the magic of old and the culture of old seems to be wrapped more within indie literature that's been keeping it alive there, as well as a lot of the older literature as well that pulled from this. Tolkien pulled from some of this for writing as well. And
Howard too. Yeah.
yeah, and like the more writers that I talk with, the more I see that almost all of them have a form. I don't want to say a form of magic in there, but you can see how a lot of what they write bleeds from their own personal culture, not just as some of the wokesters would say experiences, but culture. The things that help build individuals into who they are and sort of allow them to exist within the frames of social ecosystems. And magic kind of like, the approach of magic today shows us how all of that's just wrapped around pop culture more than anything, instead of this these lost cultures almost. What do you guys think about that little commentary there?
I just want to mention something about the thing that I forgot to say,
Yeah.
which was that the act of crafting an item back in the ancient days, it was also considered a type of magic, even making clothes. Not to speak about blacksmithing, making swords and armor, or other items. Oh yeah, it was definitely considered the type of like a bit of a higher type of folk magic, to be able to like grab the piece of ore and smelt it and extract the metal and then purify it and then somehow smith it into a sword, which is why that in the ancient days people rightfully considered like most of their items to be magical, and they would keep them, and they would take great care of them, and they would preserve them, and they would give them to their offspring. And in I don't know who was it you know that we talked about when we spoke about cooking, and you mentioned some like really old cast iron pans. Yes, these I've talked to a lady back in the day, what was a black lady, and she said like, well, my great grandmother's cast iron pan is like it's magical, and she didn't have to explain to me. I understood. So yeah,
there's actually a thing called kitchen magic, and it's not just how we think of it as, oh, somebody makes and it's good. No, there's actually kitchen magic. There are things that are supposed to be observed, and it's different for each culture, but the treatment of cast iron, of how you're not supposed to leave it out to rust or to be destroyed. You don't ever put it in the dishwasher. Please do not do that. Don't stick it in the sink and let it get all soaked in the water. If that happens, you've got to go in and you've got to treat it, and you've got to do all these wonderful things to it. You got to boil it down, and you got to let it burn to ash. You got to treat it again. You've got to do all of those things just right. But these items are imbued with such power, and there are some kitchen. The one that comes immediately to mind is if you spill salt, that you toss a little pinch over your left shoulder, and it's to leave some for the fairies. You leave some for the kitchen spirits that are there. You always leave a portion at the end of the meal. You never scoop out just everything and take it all away. You have one little portion left. That shows the cook that there was so much food that you couldn't eat all of it, and that you would have just this little tiny bit left, and that was actually offering back to that kitchen spirit. It goes back into the kitchen, and then of course it's usually given to the chickens or something else for them to eat, because nothing was ever wasted. The biggest one, of course, being you never ever throw away food, ever. it is a point almost of not just beyond impractical, because it's not right to throw away food. But I've told you before, my mother almost starved to death when she was young. She was a sharecropper's daughter, lived in a dirt floor shack, and they were very hungry during the Great Depression. She was a child, and the same way, there was ritual related to food, and this is religious, but we've talked about it before. The reason I still to this day we pray before we eat, and I've told my husband before that people don't realize we ask grace not just because we're superstitious, and not just because we want to Jesus. We really do. Food used to be extremely dangerous. You didn't know if you might be eating something that could have a deadly bacteria in it. People would actually put out their food, and my mother told me about this. I know it's true. They would put out the food, and it would sit out. You'd have a meal at the beginning of the day, and they would go out and work the fields. Then there would be the largest meal at lunch. The women, my grandmother would work all day long. She would put the food out. The hands would come in. They would eat the food as much as they could, and then they would put a cloth over it and leave it to the end of the day. There was no refrigeration. And this is Texas. It's hot. The cloth is over to keep the bugs and things off of it, to keep because you don't have screens on your windows. You don't have glass. You're living in an open, a shack that has maybe shutters on it, and people are going in and out, and the doors are open. So they would put it over. So you prayed over your food that God would protect you from whatever might have come into it during the period when you had left it out to be eaten. And then it would be given to the hogs and to the chickens and the dogs and things like that. And the scraps would be given away. Nothing was ever thrown out. But leftovers were a sacred thing. It wasn't something you could just put back. And so that idea that you would throw out food was literally an affront it was inviting poverty. It would call poverty to.
Yeah, it's basically a curse, my grandmother said. Yeah.
It's a curse to throw out your food, that one day you will wish that you had it, that you would pray for God to give it back, and it will be too late, that you mustn't ever do this because there is a karmic justice. If you throw away good food, someone else who is hungry could have used it. Your animals could have eaten it. To throw away food is to invite a terrible plague upon you, because you have obviously thrown away the gift that was given you. And so those ideals that you can't throw away food, that there are certain ways that you beat your egg. For instance, you beat it with the sun. It said you would have a certain way where you would do it, where it's almost, I believe it's clockwise, and you have to go around and around and around in a certain direction in order for it to actually work. That there are certain pans, only certain pans that you would use. And of course, this actually is science, that copper pans were used for eggs, because that way it makes the whites peak better, and that there are certain things that you wouldn't use. Well, now we know that you don't want to put tomatoes, for instance, in an aluminum pan, because it'll kind of, acid etches the metal. Well, these things were incorporated into their beliefs, in that kitchen belief. The milk being left out for the little fairies. Buttermilk was the only thing that could be left out. And the reason why is because it had beneficial bacteria. Buttermilk is actually clabbered milk. And clabbered milk means that it's spoiled, but it has gone to the point where now it's tangy. It separates and it has a special flavor. Until it gets to that point, it can actually just be bad, and it will smell bad and taste bad. When it's clabbered milk, when it's actually buttermilk, it tastes sweet. But there's a point in there where if you left the milk out, you left it out for the brownies and the house spirits. And you would put out that little bit for them. That's the milk you would have left over. And it would be given away to the animals the next day, or done something else with it. You did not take it for yourself. Part of that is related into science. The fact that you don't want to eat something that milk can go bad if it's been left out too long, that E. coli and other things can get growing in it. But in a time where they didn't want to waste anything, you had to give it to something. And so anything that was left over was given to the house spirits. And then it was given to the chickens or something later. But you didn't ever eat it for yourself afterwards. Once it's given to the house spirit. And we have that sort of echoed in our folk belief about giving Santa Claus a cookie, that you leave it out and then he'll bite out of it in the morning. It's kind of like that offering to the house spirits. So you have these little rituals that by the time my parents come along, they've lost that sort of house spirit feel, but you still do this because That's what your grandmother did, and that's what her grandmother before her did. And these things that were taught as part of ritual and magic are also about kitchen safety, about not mixing your bowls. You know, that if you have a bowl for milk, you don't use the same bowl for milk as you use for for meat. And my father actually told me this one, and I had never thought about it. I've never heard anybody else say this, that you could not have tuna and milk. That if you had tuna fish and milk at the same time, any canned fish or anything, you would die.
Yeah. The same, exactly the same. Yeah.
Thank you. It's related, of course, to the fact that fish can, you know, I've told you before, my mother would always test the food before she would give it to us, that she would eat about 30 minutes before. So if it had something wrong with it, she would feel it first. She was literally the food tester. And my father told me that when he was very young, you know, that tuna fish, they had canned food, but it was still a relatively new comparative to, you know, other forms of preservation. And so the idea that he would die if he ate this. One time he had a tuna fish sandwich and a glass of milk, and this is raw milk, y'all. This is not from a store. This comes from a cow that's living in his yard. And he had the sip of milk, and he was about 5 years old, and he realized he was going to die. So he went out and he laid in the leaves and lay down and covered himself over with the leaves and waited to die. And then after a little while, he realized that he needed to go to the bathroom and he wasn't going to die fast enough. And so he got back up and went in the house, and it's got him to thinking about, you know, why did they tell him that he would die if he had the milk and the fish? And it's because you're taking two different food forms that can have issues. Milk notably would have brucellosis from time to time. It's undulant fever, which can kill.
Yes.
And then you have tuna fish, which of course can go bad and have E. coli or botulism sometimes, I believe is one other one that can have. And so these are two dangerous ones that come together that create a certain environment that might make it more likely that you would have a bad bacteria if they both shared the same problem. Well, he had thought about that, and that was part of that ritual. Part of it is based in science, but it's also based in someone telling you if you do these things, you're inviting disaster. And so it got me to thinking about those house spirits and the things that are there. And my mother, as a real estate agent, said the same thing, that houses have a spirit of their own, even as you have the kitchen spirits and things like that. Houses have a spirit. And the people that have lived there before you and the things that are left there will actually have this spirit imbued in them. And she said, you know, you could almost feel it when you walked into certain places. And people still do this. They will actually leave shoes. I think it's in the fireplace, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Behind the stoves. That's you know, to settle the person in, I believe is the way it is, that's your sort of your mark. And it's to help sell the house too. It's to attract the next buyer, the next owner. The same thing with the statue of Saint Joseph being buried upside down in the yard. And if you do that, a lot of people will find a statue in their yard, and it's a little statue of Saint Joseph, especially on the east coast of the United States. And this is actually a Catholic tradition that you bury the statue and it will attract the buyers, because it brings it to them. It's a blessing. And so then some people will go out and dig it up and other people leave it. But the people who have been there on the land before you, not just the house, but the land itself. And I know where we live, there are some artifacts that have been left behind by they're Tawakoni, which are the tribe that was here, is part of the Caddo Tawakoni Wichita group. And they were on this land as well as some other places. And they would have communal groups that would go around almost like a town. They would have a shared farm, and they would go from place to place, and they would settle and then move those little towns over. And some of them became quite large. Tawakona Hill, which actually had almost 800 Tawakona living there. And the same thing with the Waco Tawakona village, where they had 800 to 1,200, I believe. Well, we had this area out here. I was excavating, and I was digging for a little rose bush, and I found this tiny piece of flint. And now it's flint. It's beautiful. It's pink, almost. It has a marbled texture to it. It's just absolutely gorgeous. But it's flint. It's not from around here. We don't have flint here. And as I looked at it and I saw the way it was flaked and shaped, I said, "This is a scraping tool. This is actually a scraping tool." And it was a tiny thumb-like part, and it's actually for scraping sinews. I had found some woman's prized possession, this beautiful little piece of flint that she had used in ancient days to strip away the sinew from probably buffalo hides or something like that, so she could make thread to sew things together. And it's got a little notch in it, and it's got the place you'd hold it in your hand, and you could actually put your thumb right where it's supposed to go. I was so excited about this, and I had it, and I knew exactly where I found it, and I brought it in the house. And the next day, a storm comes, and the wind is just wailing, and it sounds like a woman crying. And I'm thinking to myself, does she want her toy back? And I'm not trying to be weird about it, but I'd never heard the wind cry that way. And the trees are just moaning and they're bending in the wind. And I've been a storm chaser all my life, but I'd never heard one sound like somebody crying for something. So just to be on the safe side, I took it out and I planted it back under where I'd put my new rose bush. And the crying stopped. And I haven't touched it since. It's right there. It's right there in the front yard. It's never coming back out. I'm not going to touch it because I believe that, yes, that spirit somehow imbued it was her possession. I have all of this jewelry and everything that I need, and my spirit's probably in it somewhere in there too. But this was what she had. This was her prized possession of little pink flint that she used to make her own jewelry and her own things, and to sew moccasins for her children, and make a back strap so she could carry her young. And this was hers. Come from probably 200 miles away to find that flint to bring it where she was living in this place. And when I gave it back and the crying stopped, I was like, maybe there is something to this. Maybe there really is that lingering spirit, that the things and the places and the worlds we've lived in and the things we've touched do really stay afterwards. And I'm glad she's not crying anymore because I haven't heard it since.
Yeah, that's good. You returned the slab. I mean, the flint. There was this this thing that I was told by a sailor, and he said that in like they're not like they are not doing it anymore, but in the ancient days when they would capture let's say a pirate ship, I'm not talking about the age of gunpowder. I'm talking about the ancient Greece, ancient Rome, etc., etc. So when they would capture a pirate ship, they would, and he theorized that this is where the keel hauling. It's like, what keel hauling is, by the
Yes,
way.
I actually do.
So this is where that came from, and it originally was like a sacrifice made. They would take one of the enemies, they would like pierce their Achilles with, and then like a knife, and they would tie them to a rope, and they would hold them, and this would purify the captured ship from their spirits. So basically, it's like then they would cut off the rope and let the body like float away. So yeah, it's kind of a grisly magic, but a lot of like there were a lot of again a higher tier magic back in the ancient days, which included sacrifice, and let's say the priests or the seers who would cut open like a goat or a sheep, and they would divine upon how the organs were. I am not sure if you probably read about it. Yeah, and then it was something which was considered expensive, which was the oblation with the wine. Wine was not that cheap. I mean,
pay for it.
yeah. So This too, and then you had these figurines, which is sort of similar to the voodoo, some aspects of the voodoo, where you had, like in the ancient world, you had figurines of your ancestors, and you would, again, this is folk magic, this is like everyday magic, and then you would call them to help you in certain tasks as if they are there by virtue of the small statues.
Yeah.
If you've seen James, you've seen the Gladiator with
Yeah.
Ridley Scott's. Yeah, that's like he was doing that. So yeah, that too is it. This is not a religious ritual. This is magic.
Yes, it's related to your family and the surroundings. And you talked about the ships. One of the things my father taught me, and he was, as I said, he first crossed the equator in 1940. It was 1941, excuse me, the year after his father died. And so some of these beliefs were still in place. The belief that you should not ever hurt an albatross, that you cannot kill that seabird, that if you did, it would bring a curse down. And of course, this is famously remembered in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, where the protagonist kills this bird and then he's cursed, and the entire ship is cursed because, and how he is released from his sin for hurting albatross. This was still very much, the albatross is the spirit of dead sailors. You don't dare touch it. They are coming back to see what you are doing. That's why they follow the ships. And so in those beliefs, you have the idea when you would have burial at sea, each time they would sew them up into the canvas, and then they would take one last stitch, would go through the nasal septum, actually the piercing right where the nose would normally go, so that if they were still alive, they would move. That would pierce it. And then you give them to the sea. And once the sea takes the dead, you do not go back to get them. What the sea takes, the sea has its own. And that belongs to it forever. The idea of bothering a sunken ship would certainly bring the spirits of the dead, because that is their grave. It is the grave of the sailors. And always we must not ever, even as you have the rituals of the graveyards here on earth, we also have the rituals of the graveyards of the deep, and they are very sacred. And so the idea that you would go to the shipwreck and you could take a submersible or something perhaps to discover what's in it, but you would have to be very respectful, and you couldn't say things or say vulgar words or do anything else, because it is a graveyard. And the same thing with graves. My family loved going to graveyards. I have no idea. We were very goth in some ways, I guess. And so we would actually be, when we would be out driving, and back in the days when you didn't have, internet and everything else like that, or for cell phones, we would go on family trips. And if we saw a graveyard, we would just stop. It didn't have to be ours. It would just be anybody's. And we would go wander through the graveyard, and we would look at the families there. And we would talk about the history of the time in which those families passed. Frequently, we would find a whole set of graves of an entire family, all died in the same year, especially in 1919. That was the year of the Spanish flu, when the whole families would pass away. And we would talk about the history of the place, or names, or a little grave out by itself, and maybe it was just the only one, and how you would always try to remember that. And if you pass that grave, you shouldn't step on the graves, but you should always place a flower or something. You should remember. You should say something, because you're not just walking through a warehouse for bodies. You're not just, this is just a place to put them. This is a garden of the dead. And there are special rituals and remembrances that go with those gardens. For instance, you are supposed to, in some cultures, we have a graveyard out here that's very specifically, it's called scraped mounds. You would actually scrape the earth so no grass would grow upon it. And you would mound up the soil as if it's a bed. You would make sure that it's nice and round, so it shows where the grave actually is. The other thing is that no cattle must be allowed to graze upon the graves. No animals must be allowed to go in and eat where the graves are. And so you would have this grass all scraped away, or it would be kept completely cleared. And then you would decorate the graves with shells Something about the ocean and leaving these little things behind makes it more beautiful and brings the promise of the return of life, like the return of the tide. And so shells and things would be left behind. And this remained in our culture here today. Not only do we have this beautiful cemetery that's actually out there that has the same scraped mounds and the grass pulled away, but they're also, we talked about how somebody had gone out one time to eat with the dead. They have picnic on the grounds, and you would actually eat your picnic on the Memorial Day where you go out and clean up the graves and do everything. Well, the melons started growing. There's melons all over this graveyard, and I'm not going to pick them. They belong to the dead. I'm not going to eat them. But beautiful. They're so large. They're these, like, I think they're called rattlesnake. They're like this really big long one. And none of us will eat that because my deaconess is buried out there, and I'm not going to mess with her watermelons. That's hers, and she gets to keep them. And we know they're in heaven. I mean, I know that, but still, that's theirs. Well, that's the same way we have with our dead being buried where they are facing east. And as I've told you before, my church, because it's over 100 years old and it's the original building, it is built to where the altar is in the east. And as the setting sun sets, it will light the altar just like Stonehenge. You can watch the sun come up and touch the altar. This is part of that earth magic that we have, where we actually orient our buildings to a certain place. And the dead are supposed to face east so that when they wake up, they will rise and see Christ coming, because traditionally he will come from the east with the rising sun, as he rose on the third day of the dead. And so our graves are all pointed east, unless you died in your sin. And if you died in your sin, not professing Jesus Christ, you were facing north-south. Or away from the east, you'd face west. The point was that you would wake up and you wouldn't see him, and you would know, and you would turn your head to acknowledge Christ, and therefore you would be saved. And so you would, the great getting up morning, you would see that you were facing the wrong way, and you would correct yourself and greet Christ, and then you would remember why you were buried the wrong way. And so these beliefs and these rituals, we actually have some graves that are pointed a different direction, and we know why. And so we pray over those ones because we know that they were specially buried for that reason. But we also have some other special things that are out in that graveyard. The little toys and things that are left behind now, the little memories and stuff. These are very popular in the South, and I know in some places they also do this, where we plant trees and we plant bushes around the graves. And that's becoming less and less common now because they want to be able to mow them quickly, and they want to go over it with a piece of machinery. They don't want to have anything in the way. But at my little church, we still have the tradition of planting roses and plants and other things, and of having it set aside special for that reason. And so I think that the graveyard magic, the fact that it has what's called a lich gate, which is a gate designed to not just keep the cattle out, but to keep the dead in, because they're supposed to be there. They're supposed to be asleep in Christ. And in fact, one of the traditions we have at my little church is we say good night, sleepers, as we leave, because the graveyard is right there beside the church. And I've never been afraid. It's right there. I know better than to just go running around out there and being crazy, but to know that they're asleep and everything's peaceful and the moon is beautiful above us, it's actually a very peaceful and lovely place. That's my dog coughing. Poor puppy, it's okay, don't do that. That magic is presented in Watcher of the Damned, because we have the cemeteries become sacred waypoints. When you don't have roads left and you don't have a way to know how far you are from one point to the next, cemeteries remain. They're one of the last lasting monuments in most cities. And even if most of them get taken out to make way for real estate or development or other things, usually there's something left, something ancient and something old. There will be something that denotes this was a place that was once sacred. As a result, in Watcher of the Damned, when they're making their way through the apocalyptic Texas outback, they find these old cemeteries, and that's where they meet their next contact as they're going on the road to freedom. And they go to these sacred places where the hallowed dead are. Now, the unhallowed dead are the ones that have not yet been buried. They were the ones that died during the Great Dying, the ones that are left in the houses and the fields and the cars and in the buildings and the cities. They have never been consecrated, and as a result, their deaths are different. And the way that they interact with the hallowed dead, the ones who are celebrated and sacred, they are different in that way. And so writing that into Watcher of the Damned with all of the graveyard magic and the different symbols and the different things that it means and some of the ways that it can actually be used to help orient people on a map, I loved writing that in. And I thought it was really unique that we got a chance to do that and to share some of that lore and that ritual magic with our readers.
Snow, remember the because you read the intro book, the Star Shattered intro book. Remember the Tri-Ship Monument?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's basically a space graveyard. It's the conjoined hulls of these three first cruisers, Terran cruisers, and their crews. They're just there, entombed within where they died, including their enemies. They're also there.
Wow.
And no one moves them. They're just there. The ships are kept in a specific orbit in the solar system, and every month there are people who visit, especially parents who bring their children, and they go on groups like to like it's a pilgrimage site, and they would see and they would show them one or another person dead, and they are preserved. I mean, this is outer space. This is a vacuum of space. They will not rot, and so they would. I mean, of course, they have damage, but otherwise, yeah,
well,
you can.
Like the ossuaries.
Yeah. So pretty much the idea was that to combine the cultures where you have mummification, like ancient Egypt, the ossuary culture in Europe, and of course like the honor, the hollow dead aspect of it all, because they did sacrifice for everyone, and it's a place where aliens pretty much like random aliens, they do not go because they feel dread if they go near in their spaceships. Even if they look at it, they feel dread, like they are filled with dread. So yeah, it's a sort of a sci-fi graveyard magic, if you would say so. Yeah. I would very much like it if you could read some of the advanced passages in newer books about this, about the Tri-Ship Monument.
Oh yeah.
So because it has a very basic description in the intro book, because it's an intro book, so a lot of the details are missing.
Oh, all right. Yeah, you got to dig into the details there.
You're not going to get the whole story unless you read the whole.
But with that said, we are approaching the half-hour mark. So why don't we go ahead and share some final thoughts and tell people where we can find you? When we start off with you, Snow.
Well, howdy. Well, first of all, you can hear my dog over here is coughing. I have to go pat him on the back or something. He's
sometimes it could be like phlegm stuck in their like throat or their nostril area. Sometimes what would help is like covering up one nostril.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know why he's doing it.
That's good to know.
Yeah, really. But when I'm not messing with my puppy dogs, you can find me at watcherthedam.com or under RH Snow at Watcher of the Damned on Amazon as well, where we've got our my right now heading towards the second end of the second series, as we have Watcher of the Damned Watcher, a whole 1 through 6 books that culminate with a sort of an arc of its own, and then we have Watcher of the Damned Wanderer with Hellbilly Highway being the final installment in that one. And so we have all of those stories available and ready for you. And I'm still working on all of those. And we are finishing out the series, I hope, in this next year, as we have Watcher of the Damned Warlord will be written, and the whole will come to a finale. And then I get to go ahead and actually sell it, because I promised myself that I would actually finish the series before I started marketing.
Yeah, you're rapidly approaching the end there.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. That's a milestone we all want to hit right there. But Black Knight, how about you, man?
Well, you can find my all of the books so far published from the Star Shatter series on Amazon, including the 2 story collections, A Mandate of Sword and Railgun and The Blood of Tyrants, plus my Shadow Fantasy, Lord of Bones, and of course the offshoot novellas about Vaylin Doltorian, my Conan-esque hero, in also set in the Star Shatter universe. And if you like to read some, well, not some, but lots of free stuff like stories and poems, haiku, and even short novellas, you can go to my Substack, theblacknight.com, and do some reading. Get some fun reading.
Nice. Yeah, I got to get your Substacks on the put them in the description, because I got you guys as Amazons in the description, so you guys can check out the Amazon page, pick yourselves up some books and stuff. But with that said, thank you all for joining us for another magnificent Terran Tuesday. Come on back next week. If you're go ahead and watch this on a replay, give it a thumbs up, share with your friends. You know they want to check this stuff out. And we're going to go ahead and see you guys next week. Hope you come back and join us, because we'll definitely be here. We're headed out now. Bye-bye, everybody.